Okay, we are live. Awesome. We had a massive storm last week and it took out power, and there's still power down and trees and everything else. So I apologize profusely for the delay. This video was supposed to happen on Friday, but here we are now, and I am going to open up the chat so that we can talk about what it is I'm going to do today. So here I am today with Aussie Decor Transfers. Hello, Amber. Thank you for joining me. And Jesse, excellent. So we are here today for Aussie Decor Transfers, and I am working with the Up and Away luxe rice paper decor transfer. So I'm going to actually make sure you guys can see properly, because you don't really need to see me. So I'm going to adjust the camera a little bit so that you have a better view of the image rather than me talking. There we go. Awesome. Yeah, I want you to be able to see everything, because the way I'm recording, I'm not able to see the chat and see myself. So I'm just gonna have to trust that you guys can see anything in here. So if there's something a little wonky, just make sure you put it in the chat. So the first thing I've done is I have taken a round panel board. And so for those of you unfamiliar with these, this is a 24-inch gallery depth cradle board. And once this is done, I think it's going to look great in the circular. I'm going to make sure you guys can still see. Yeah, it's going to look great, I think, in the circular fashion rather than on a square wall painting. And I am getting this piece ready for encaustic art. So encaustic is basically painting with molten beeswax. And there's a lot more to it for those of you who are new to encaustic. However, for those of you who are familiar with it, you do know, or you will know, that in order to be able to put encaustic wax on this, we have to keep it acrylic free. So basically, we have to keep it ready to accept the wax. So that's what when I'm working with the materials I'm working with today, it's because of that reason. So I've gone ahead and I've attached this to the round panel. And now now that it's dry, I'm going around with a razor blade and I'm just cutting off the excess paper. So I always save my extra little bits of paper just in case, like let's say, I wanted to go over here where it's missing and then add a little bit. I can always add little bits and pieces. I never throw out my excess papers or pieces that I'm cutting off. So I'm just going to go around with the razor blade and cut off everything that need not be here. So ever since I familiarized myself with Aussie Decor Transfers, I have been in love with this luxe paper. And the design Up and Away has been, sitting in the back of my mind, brewing as a painting for a very long time. So the way I work as a mixed media artist is very free and creative. So I try not to plan too much. So what I have in front of me here is just a palette of chalk paints. So the reason I'm using chalk paints, and I just dispense my own, but the reason I'm using chalk paints is because the wax really likes to stick and basically adhere to that surface. So that's why I'm working with that. Now, before I do anything else, I have to make sure that my playing field is level, okay? So my canvas has to be level. So you can see here on the side, there's still a bit of the panel showing, and that could amplify when I get all my paint on and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a paper texture paste, and it has to be absorbent for the wax in order for it to adhere to that. So I'm just going to take a little bit And I'm going to put that as a thin layer just over that one area. There we go. Just so that once that is dry, I can sand that smooth, but then I won't have that little level and I won't have that area of the cut paper. So if you are modifying any of your pieces to fit onto, whether it be a panel or a canvas, or whether you are going to place it on a piece of furniture and you want to move it around or whatever, if you have that little piece of paper showing, it does tend to get magnified later on. So I always try to use a little drywall compound or something just to make sure that that's smooth, and then when it's dry you can smooth it out, and just by sanding it, and you can take care of that problem. So what I'm going to, my first impressions when I look at this is that I'm not really a huge fan of the baby blue. So I'm going to change the color of the sky. I don't really need the buildings and the clouds in the background, so that I'm going to work with and eliminate as well. Then my gut right now is to eliminate just a little bit of the pink. So I don't mind a little bit of pink in my art, but I'm just not sure I need that much pink. So the first thing I'm going to do is to start to tint out the background. So I am going to use white chalk paint to start, and I'm just going to start to paint around these hot air balloons using the white. Now while I've got a mosquito again in my studio. So while I'm painting this out, I'm going to get close to the objects, but not entirely close, because I have such a huge brush. I don't want to get too close, but I do want to start eliminating the baby blue background, and I think I'm going to go for a more white, maybe add a little bit of blue, but for now I'm just going to just take that out. There we go. So I'm never known for being conservative or afraid to make changes in my art. So you don't want to look at using transfers as sort of a something you're stuck with. So if you are using a transfer, which I love all these rice paper decoupage papers that Aussie Decor Transfers has now, like, it is just, I can't tell you enough how much these influence and help my paintings. But don't be afraid to make them your own. So the guideline for me is that if it's not something at the end of the day that I would hang in my house or that I would use in my own decor, then it's just not going to work for me. So I just need to alter it a little bit. So sometimes it doesn't need as drastic a change as this one. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that you wanted to change more than just, if you want to change more than just the background, you can also change the colors of the balloons and everything else. So it doesn't matter what it is you're working with. You just want to make sure that you're not afraid, basically, that once you've adhered it, and then if you want to, you can seal it first just to preserve what's underneath. Then you can always change things. And chalk paints are a great way to change these products. Now what I'm doing, just for a little, I'm just trying to see, I think as I get closer to the top of the balloon where it's simple, I think I'm just going to cut in with the white. But as I get, and I'm watering it down just a little bit as well, just in case I'm not entirely accurate. I can always touch that up afterwards. But I'm just going to go in with the white a bit of a white wash as I'm putting it because I've got some water in my brush, making it thinner. I'm actually going to go over the strings, I think, on this one because you can see that there's a lot of the background in that one. And if I keep it thin enough, I'll be able to see the strings. And where are my baby wipes? All the way over there. Okay, so normally I use my baby wipes. If someone comes into my studio, I'll holler at them to grab those for me. In the meantime, we're just going to work away and get close to these objects. Like I said, if it's where the strings are, I'm actually just going to keep it nice and translucent. There we go. So, and the thinner you make your paint, you just might have to go back with more coats, which is great. There we go. Which is great because you can keep it then as translucent as you want. So getting a little bit closer to these ones now. There we go. I think I picked up a titch of cream in this one, so it's all good. It's just the colors have changed a little bit. I work with a very wet palette, so colors tend to run together a little bit. There we go. Okay, so you can see how I'm going to have to get in again where I'm not close enough, but that's okay. I also tend to work very quickly, so when I work quickly, I work intuitively. So for those of you who are new to the way I do art, my favorite word is respond. So I always feel like you're kind of sort of trapped in a painting and you can't move forward unless you can respond to something you've done. So anytime I see one of my students or even myself just sitting there like wondering what's the next step, I always just say, just do anything. Just grab something and just do something. Because if you don't do anything, you have nothing to respond to. So I am forever responding and coming back to my art with a different or fresh eyes rather, because I've just added something. So I'm always adding something. The best part about adding something is you can always take something away. So you don't like what you did, modify it. And what footprint it leaves behind is always super interesting. So we'll get a little closer here. Yeah, so the footprint of what you remove behind or leave behind is always really interesting because like you can leave a little bit of decay or a little bit of white or something like that. So I always find that if you are responding in your artwork, it remains spontaneous, it remains free, it remains completely open for the possibility of something to happen and something different, especially if you're a type of artist who tends to work the same all the time, meaning that you have a methodology about your work, you go about it the same way, maybe even you work in a series a lot where you make the same thing over and over again, and it just loses its freshness and its fun. So it tends to feel a little bit heavy. It feels like work at that point. So in order to keep it fresh, just always be open to doing something new, something creative. And that's why starting off with a rice paper transfer, such as these luxe rice paper decoupage papers, I really have a great jumping off point. Okay, so I am going to have to grab my baby wipes. There's just nobody coming in the studio to rescue me at this point. So pardon me for one quick second. There we go. They weren't far. just out of my reach. And I'm going to make sure I don't bump the camera so that you can still see what I'm doing. There we go. All right, so baby wipes are always one of my go-to materials because baby wipes are actually like super corrosive. They bite into that paint surface really, really well. So where I haven't been exactly perfect with my cutting in or edging around this piece is really great because I'm able to just go back in with a baby wipe and just disintegrate it a little bit into the background. And then the other beautiful thing about that is it tends to make things look a little distressed, which happens to be a look I love. So baby wipes on fresh paint, you don't want to let this dry too long because it is a little bit more challenging to remove paint that has been cured. So if it's been sitting for several hours, even overnight, depending on your temperature and stuff like that, it can actually be a bit of a hassle trying to get it off. But fresh paint, it works like a charm. So you can see I'm just distressing a little bit by removing some of that. Distressing those edges a little bit. There we go. And revealing that sort of light blue background that was in there before. It just makes it look less like a cutout, right? So I'm happy to give it a bit of an old world look. I think I need a new baby wipe there. What happens with the baby wipes is they pick up. Oh, hello, Michelle from France. It is the evening there. So I could be doing a night scene. That's the other thing about altering the background is I could change this entirely to become a night scene. So now I'm going to go around with the baby wipe and I'm going to distress a little bit of the edges. And you know what I'm going to do? Maybe I'm going to just add a little bit of water. So water is also super corrosive to fresh paint. So it's going to soften it up a little bit and loosen it. And then I'm going to grab another baby wipe and then I'm just going to start to smear it, I guess is the best word. I'm going to move some of the paint around and eliminate some of my brush strokes. And what it's going to do is it's going to give it a bit more of a distressed look and also a bit more unified. So where I have brush strokes, where I have heavier paint, I'm just going to be able to soften that a little bit. Where I have the drips, it's also cut right through that paint, which I think is awesome. So working with the chalk paints, like I said, is going to get this ready for encaustic wax. Now, before you would do anything like this, I'll repeat this again later, but you're going to have to let it dry completely so that the wax will have something to adhere to and that it has a very, what's the best way of putting it? Like the dry finish, but also you're not going to trap mold and things underneath, right? So to give it the best fighting chance of being a really good, solidly built foundation painting, encaustic painting, you have to make sure that the base is completely dry. So I wouldn't even wax this until at least tomorrow. There we go. So I think this side looks like it needs a little more of the distressing. There we go. Okay, so the white is so much better. I'm liking it so much. Now I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to pick up a bit of water and my white. But now I'm also going to pick up just a hint of a blue chalk paint. So this blue chalk paint is called Clothesline and it's by Colorantic. And it's just got enough of that purpley blue sort of color to it. Like I said, I didn't want this to be a baby blue, but I'm just going to soften and add a little bit of blue here and there with the paint mixed into the white on my big brush. And I'm just doing a few crosshatch marks. Again, I don't want this to be a perfect cutout looking painting. There we go. And now for something a little bit different than before, I'm actually going to mix those colors using my baby wipes. So I'm going to grab another baby wipe. And I'm actually just going to start to gently manipulate that paint around in a circular motion, create a bit of a sky, but I don't want to take it over the balloons. And I'm trying to eliminate brush strokes and sort of awkward marks like that one. Okay. And just introduce a teeny bit of that blue into my distressed white background. Okay. So I think that's looking pretty good. I'm going to tilt this down just for 1 sec so that I can see what we're all looking at here. Good. So it's like looking in a mirror when you're looking at your art. You get a really better perspective, obviously, when you have a good look at it. There we go. Okay, so up we go. So I can read the comments. If you have questions, make sure you fire them away. Okay, so now I've done the background. I'm going to let that sit for a little bit. I'm going to work on tinting some of these balloons because, like I said, I like a hint of pink, but maybe not so much pink. So I'm just going to pick up a little bit on my brush. I'm using water, and then I'm just going to pick up a little bit of an orange color first. And then let's see how that looks on top. So I'm using it like a watercolor. And we'll see if that is looking a little bit better. So an orange, it's like a burnt orange, but it's mostly water, right? So I'm just basically tinting it with a colored water. And then I can build that up as much as I want, but I think that's much better. And then now that same orange color, I'm going to introduce it in other spots, just because I don't like leaving things completely on their own. So unless, even if I want these hot air balloons to be different colors, I'm just going to always put a little bit of each one into the previous one and into all of them. So it doesn't have to be like all of it like this one, but I'm going to change them all and add a little bit here and there. Okay, so let's deal with that one up there. I'm going to add a little bit again to all of them. So a little drip happening there. I don't mind drips, so if you are a person who does not enjoy drips, you might want to catch that if that happens. Okay, so yeah, that's looking pretty good. And then again, a little more orange, lots of water, and let's try and change the tone of this one. Now, this is, the orange is just one layer, right? With the wax, I have a question here. So with the wax, will you leave a negative space? I'm not sure I'm understanding the question entirely, but negative space for me is generally my white area. So, or my background or whatever, and then I will leave a little bit of negative space. In fact, I even had a bit of of a concern that maybe I should have a fifth hot air balloon or something here. So I'll address that part later as my negative space. But the wax is actually clear. So when I'm adding the wax, it's a sealant, and it's going to add just another dreamy sort of layer to this whole thing. So it softens and it makes everything just a little more rich and dreamy looking. So that's why I'm altering the colors a little bit, because once it's sealed in with the wax, there's no going back. So I hope that answered the question. If not, just fire away and I'll definitely answer that for you. But I picked up some of that blue that I initially showed you, and it's not a translucent color. So I'm just going to play with it a little bit and see how it looks to maybe do some striping or something with the orange. Let's see, that one has a design on it, so am I bold enough to change that? Actually, I don't think I will. You know what I might do? I might just change the top of this one to the blue. And then maybe even the bottom part of it. Probably chosen the wrong brush because I'm not getting a really good shape out of that, but that's okay. Nothing a baby wipe can't fix. I'm just gonna go and fix that. And put my blue a little more opaque. There we go. And same at the top. Bit more opaque. There we go. So that's looking good. Hi, Wendy. Nice of you to join us. All right. So if anybody has any more questions, fire away. I do take a glance back every once in a while. No. So I already determined that was the wrong size of brush, so I'm not sure why. I'm going to do the same thing over and over again. I'm going to start introducing a bit of white into this one because I just feel that white might be good in this one. It has a lot of colors that I'm not super fond of. I'm not super fond of the pink with the baby blue together. It's just a combination that I don't often see in my work. As I was mentioning, if I'm not going to hang it on my wall, then I change it. So that's really my rule of thumb when it comes to creating art and finding the brave, I guess, next move in a painting, or what it requires to change colors. Sometimes requires a bit of, biting the bullet and changing the color. And for me, my parameters for that is basically if I'm not going to hang it in my house as is, then I have to change it. So that's how I choose. So the reason I did that so opaque, you'll see in a moment, I'm just going to take a baby wipe to that, but I'm going to let that sit for a minute. And then I'm also going to bring some of the white into this piece as well. There, just soft. And then in here, I'm going to bring in a different color. It looks the same as white, but it's actually just like an off-white. It's called titanium buff. There we go. So it's just off of a white. Okay, so now that I have those colors just kind of sitting there for a minute, I know I didn't do a great job. I'm going to use my baby white, and that's going to help me to soften them. So what I'm doing to soften this is I'm just going to start to press and lift, and that allows me to soften the edge, but it also allows me to remove incrementally so that I'm not wiping. If you start wiping, Two things can happen. One, you can wreck the picture underneath, but two, you can also remove more than you had intended. So I'm just going to keep dabbing. Now with baby wipes, you have to be a little bit tenacious. You have to keep going back and pouncing and lifting, because when you're doing this, it doesn't come off as quickly, and you don't want to be really aggressive with this step. You want to do this sort of gently and incrementally so that it blends nicely. There we go. That little bit of orange looks like it's needing a little bit more, but I like it a lot. I'm going to do the same with this one. So you can see I'm just adding a bit of brightness to it, and only that so that there's a relationship between the balloons and the background. So they had a great relationship before when the background was blue, because it was sort of a mid-tone. And then, yes, Amber, I fully agree with you when I have my studio door open today and the mosquitoes are in here and they are ferocious. Okay, so yeah, so I'm just making a nice relationship between the background and the balloons. And the more you go back and pounce, the more you remove. So that's all I'm doing now. Just removing a bit more. And then I'm going to clean up with the baby wipe around this balloon a little bit, because my blue got a little bit. There we go. Nice shape. And now the white on this one, again, should be blended a bit. So as a mixed media artist, I tend to just keep playing with layers. It's not a planned effort. It is just basically having lots of materials around you that you love and inspire you, and then being able to just, you know, respond by doing the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So when I saw the discrepancy between the white background and then these balloons, it just told me that I needed a little bit of, there we go, a little bit of a relationship between the two, so it didn't look so crazy. Now this one looks like now all of a sudden it's like just begging for a little bit of white, right? So I'm going to have to, I was going to change that blue by adding just a little bit of white into it, so I can change that a little bit. So it's just about responding, right? Playing, responding. This one needs a little bit of white, maybe on this side, maybe a little bit here. So again, it's just about placing it and letting it dry for a few seconds before I go in with the baby wipe, because like I said, the baby wipes can be really aggressive on fresh paint. So just gonna soften that up a little bit. Okay, so now I'm gonna go back in with my orange, and this one is going to get a little bit more orange on this side, and there's a little bit of white in my brush, which I'm not hating. It creates a nice little variation from this darker orange that we've got going here. And okay, so I think this one up here is also ready now for my blending. I think this baby wipe's getting a little spent. I'm gonna have to grab another one. There we go. Okay, now this orange one looks like it can be softened a bit as well. Yeah, the colors are looking so much more like something I would hang in my house. So it's the same image, right? It's the same idea. It's just different somehow. It's just customized to you. So, okay, sorry about the little moment here. I just decided I'm going to add a little bit of the burnt orange with a bit of brown in it. So it kind of makes like a weird green color. Oh, I went on the outside of that. That's not cool. And I'm going to add a little bit of that greeny color, which is just going to add a little bit of antiquing. So this is raw umber with a bit of burnt orange. And I'm just applying it as a shadow or as a shade. And I can also add it to the baskets because I kind of messed up the baskets a little bit with paint, but that's okay. I want to just change their shape a little bit, maybe add a bit of color to them. And again, I'm just not being super careful about the painting because I'm going to end up blending most of it with the baby wipe anyway. So where it lands is okay. Let's get that. So my shading is really not a float technique or any kind of a technique. It's more about add paint and then just take it away with the baby wipe. I always find that that's one of my more tried and true techniques. Not exactly very good here with the shape, but that's okay. I can alter those if need be. Okay, so you see so now the contrast is coming in because I've added the white. Now I need a bit of depth. So that's why I'm adding the dark in this raw umber. Okay. Okay, now I'm just going to put a bit of water in my brush to thin it out, and I'm going to go down the sides again with a drip. I'm okay with drips. If you're not, catch that drip. Very watery brush at the moment, just so that I can create my wash. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to take a fresh baby wipe again. My screen froze. There we go. I want to make sure you guys can all see. Okay, so now I'm just going to start to blend again using the dabbing technique. And you can remove as little or as much as you want. I like a bit of contrast, especially because I'm going to be putting the wax over top, and that wax will create like that dreamy, almost like looking through it through a veil effect. Okay, let's get rid of that drip. And then these, I'm just going to dab, blend. So the colors are looking much more antique and rich. And the white background is really looking like something that I can get behind. Like it's really, it's soft, but it's bold at the same time. It's the exact same image I started out with, but I've just added, there we go. I've just added, I'm going through these baby wipes like crazy today. I'm not sure how I thought I could do this without them. Okay, and then one more over here. So raw umber is probably my favorite color on the palette, just because it adds such a richness without adding black. So when you add black as a shadow, like you're really going intense, right? So I'm always trying to add just a little bit of black if I'm going to do any black, and I generally add that more at the end, and it's just in small hits. The raw umber really is something that I find adds enough richness, but it also adds a real natural quality to your shadows and your shading. So, all right, so I'm really liking this now. Now I'm going to go back in with a little bit of the white in the background, and just because I've made a bit of a mess here and there, and even though I like a nice contrasted, clean approach, I just find some of my areas are starting to look just a wee bit grungy, even for me. So even for me means a lot to me, because I can tend, or I have a tendency to make my art look pretty grungy at times, and I love that. But I have to say, if I'm doing things with other clients in mind, people, even gallery owners, will sometimes say to me, is that part intentional? You know, if I have a big gouge in it or something, they're just not 100% sure what to do about that. So, or they'll tell me to come and fix something that got damaged, and I go and I'm like, no, that was totally intentional. And so anyway, so I have to temper my tendency to be a little on the grunge side, but I do that by subtly adding a bit of white or something a little fresher looking and not so grungy. So it doesn't have to be everywhere, it's just a little bit here and there. So I think this is actually looking pretty good. I'm going to go back in now with my baby wipe and just soften anything that may have just looked a little weird. When I say weird, it's just like if you can see a brush stroke, I don't like that. So I usually just tend to just blend them and get rid of any brush strokes. There. Okay, so I think I am actually really liking what's happening here. I'm going to fix up this one or two baskets that I didn't do, and then I'll soften the other ones, and then I'm going to put the strings back in. So I'll show you how I'm going to do that. So there's that new baby wipe. Thanks, Amber. I love the grunge too, and like I said, you know, small hits of it can really go a long way. So, and if you remember the transfer before, or if you go to the site, to Aussie Decor Transfers, and you look at the original picture, you'll remember what this once looked like. It was really pretty. It was in blues and pinks, and it had just a very different look. And I'm just making it my own and getting it ready for the encaustic wax. So I'm going to just dab. There we go. Okay, so here is one of my favorite tools ever. It's called an all pencil. It's by a company called Stabilo. It's an Italian one, but all ALL, meaning it writes on all surfaces. So I can put this on top of the wax, under the wax, like everywhere. It's water soluble though, so you have to be a little bit careful with it, meaning that if you're going to, you know, brush on a sealant or something like that, you can actually end up just wiping it off or smearing. So you have to be a little bit careful about that. So I can kind of still see where the strings are. And if I find a straight edge, I have one right here off screen. So again, apologies, but I can bring this pencil and I can actually just draw my lines right from the edge of the basket to the edge of the balloon. And then because I can still see where all the other ones are, I can go back in and I can add them. And I'm not making them as intense or as intentional as they were before. So if they cross a little bit, I'm not going to lose any sleep. There we go. So you see they're much more subtle. With this pencil, I can also crisp up some of my lines. change the shape a little bit because some of it lost a little bit of that, there we go, of the lines. So if you've lost, like if you are working with this transfer and you've lost your lines, try to do what makes sense, like where the balloon would be attached to and things like that. So like I said, I'm not going to lose any sleep over where the lines go and where they don't go, but at the end of the day, it kind of makes a little bit of sense. Then I'm also happy to get a little bit whimsical here and then add a little compass up here. So obviously that doesn't make any sense, so that's why it's a little bit whimsical. Now I'm going to show you, I'm going to work with the alt pencil a little bit just to create, oh yeah, there's a ring here somewhere to hold all this together, isn't there? I see it in this one. At the edge of the basket on that one. I don't know why I'm not good with rulers, but I'm actually terrible with rulers. I'm going to just freehand some of these in. And last but not least, we have this one. It has a ring as well. And then you can actually still see some of the lines on this one. I'm going to put them back. Okay, so now the basket. I'm just loosely going back in with the alt pencil and giving it a shadow side, some of the balloons, a little bit of a shadow side. All right, that's good. So now I'm just going to use water. So because these pencils are water soluble, I'm just going to use a brush with just some water in it, but not a lot of water because I don't want it to drip. And I'm going to just use this pencil like a bit of a watercolor and soften it and smear it and add that black that I was talking about. Looks nice in small hits, but not necessarily as a shadow color. So I'm just going back in using my wet brush and creating that little bit of a shadow just by loosening up that pencil. So if I were to spray it, it would actually run. There we go. Let's see. There we go. Back into the basket. And over here. Okay, I think it has enough contrast now. I'm just feeling like I might want to add just a hint of blue over here. I don't know why, but it looks like it could just use a little blue. So again, this is just one of those things where I tell you I just respond. I do something and I respond. So if blue's the wrong call, then I will take it out. But I think I'm going to soften it a little bit with my baby wipe. But essentially I like that little hit of blue over there. Need to put that hit of blue back in over on this side where I softened it a bit too much. Just going to go back in. Add that blue. At the top, same thing. Yes, I finger paint all the time. It's the best blending tool there is. Then I'll just soften the edge of it. And I think with minor changes, like up here, I ended up losing a little bit of that. I think I'm actually done. So if you have any more questions for me, now would be the time, because I think I'm getting ready for the wax, which, like I said, I wouldn't be able to do until tomorrow anyway, because it has to be perfectly dry. But there is no acrylic on here, and it is devoid of anything shiny. So shiny and plastic is the absolute enemy of encaustic. So in order for me to put encaustic on here, this has to be super dry, but it also has to be devoid of anything shiny or any plastic or anything that's going to repel the wax. So I also might sand my edges once it's fully dry. But other than that, I think I really like the way it's coming together. I might put something there, and I was talking to you guys about that earlier. So what I was thinking of was, and I'm always at the ready with collage papers, but I'm thinking if I were to take my scissors, if I can find scissors. Cannot find scissors, of course. I'm going to use just my razor blade here and see if I can cut something that looks a bit circular. So I could trace something round, and that would make my life a little easier. But because I'm doing this live for you guys, I have to just have something sort of at the ready. So this is rust paper. It's a paper that I made just by putting rusty objects, and there we go. Yeah, just by having rusty objects and placing them on raised paper and tissue papers. So I could collage this in, and the way I'm going to just collage to show you is just by getting it wet. And then I could just put this in here. There we go, so that you can see. And then what I could actually do with my pencil and all that is I could actually make a fifth balloon. And I'm going to say I'm not hating it. So if that's the case, I just go in with my pencil, and it's very wet, so I can't actually do anything, but I would collage it in with the glue. But I could actually create another balloon out of this just by having a little piece of something over here, and that's something that I may decide to do before I get ready to wax this. Hi Meg, you missed the demo, but you will be able to watch the replay. Yeah, so I think that's about it. If you are interested at all in more of my videos and things like that, be sure to visit me on YouTube or on my Facebook page. Of course, Christina Ingrid Lovisa is how you can find me. I do live videos all the time. I teach in different platforms all around the world, including an encaustic forum called Painting with Fire. So if you are interested in more encaustic, you will find more videos that way. And yeah, so basically this piece was all about getting ready for encaustic wax. And if you are interested in buying this lovely paper, thanks Amber, I really appreciate the compliment. So if you are interested in buying this paper, you can use my code Christina at the cash. Just follow the link that I've put in the description of the body of this video, and it doesn't save you a lot, but it certainly helps me out, and I really appreciate that. And yeah, so Aussie Decor Transfers, make sure you check out all their videos, or all their products, because there is so much wonderful stuff. And like I said, if you use it from the perspective of an artist and you change and adapt it to make it your own, then you can make art that really speaks to you and is something that you'll want to either gift or hang in your house or sell or whatever it is. But making it your own is definitely possible with the Aussie Decor Transfers. So again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all, I guess, in a week or two. I've kind of lost track with that storm we had, but and losing power and everything else. But I'll be back, and I'd love for you to keep watching my videos. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. I'm going to make sure there's more questions before I go. Okay, no more questions. So thanks, everybody.